There's Josh. It's Josh. That's Josh. Stoney Ridge Farmer right there, running his tractor. We're here with Josh, the Stoney Ridge Farmer in North Carolina, and when we were out last summer doing some of the fence on a project out here, we noticed that he had a gate operator, and I started talking a little bit about it with him, and he was telling me that he was having some issues. We wanted to help him get a better product and kind of showcase one of the premium operators as well as a premium solar setup and what a really good quality solar setup should look like.
Mark has asked me to take you guys through some of the troubles that I've had with our system here, and this, again, I know when I installed this was not going to be a permanent setup for the farm. This was to keep people, vacuum cleaner salesmen, out, and being popular on YouTube with 500,000 followers, man, people come down here just kind of rubbernecking, and they'll just show up to the house and blow the horn. So we've had some of that go on. So we wanted to keep our place secure, but it's not a physical barrier, and the gate that we're going to install is not a physical barrier. It's just a barrier, in other words, to keep people from being invited in. This Mighty Mule 360 has been fairly reliable, except for when temperatures get down below about 24 degrees Fahrenheit here in North Carolina, and then the gate is not very reliable. So most of the time we'll just leave the gate open. Mighty Mule system comes with a small rechargeable battery, and I have a marine type deep cycle battery right here. So I've got a couple $100 battery so that we never ever have to worry about the gate problems that we're experiencing with the smaller battery setup. This, as you can see, is quite a flexible system, quite the floppy setup, especially on a windy day. This is just doing this all day long. So here's our antenna setup for this thing, and the gate controller that SWI and Forever Fence are going to install is a controller I can actually control from a smartphone. Is that right?
So we could get a Wi-Fi module and
control it with the phone. That'd be awesome. Yeah. This is about 370, 390 bucks, something like that. The gate we have is a 16-foot gate. This is the maximum this thing will move, and it's a light-duty Tartar Farm and Ranch gate. As you can see, I've got a sign on the gate, and when the wind is whipping, this is how much movement we have in the gate, okay? This gate is designed to where it won't pinch you, but it's pushing me, okay? So you can see it's pushing me. It will hardly close because the wind is blowing against this. The gate should go all the way and strike this plate. It's not going and striking this plate. We have that much play. This was a farm gate. Our cow's gonna get pinched in this. Our cow's gonna get out of this. So what we're looking for from SWI and Forever Fence is a gate that's gonna be reliable, safe.
There's a lot of room.
Yep.
A lot of room for play. So this is very typical of what we see when we roll up on a project or somebody calls us out to service their gate operator, and we show up and see these operators. And one of the things we have to worry about is the liability associated with working with them and making sure that it's UL 325 compliant. I don't know anything about this operator, whether or not it is or isn't, so I can't speak to that. But as Josh mentioned, it does cause them a lot of grief, especially when it gets cold. From an installer's perspective, one of the things that we're concerned with is that I don't see any eyes, which means the gate doesn't know until it hits something. If it does have a force limiting device or an IES, it doesn't know until it hits something that it's there, and it can actually, as you saw, it was putting quite a bit of pressure on Josh, and if that was a small child or something like that, there could be a potential for a pinch or entrapment. There's no vehicle detection loops. Vehicle detection loops, I want to be very clear, are not designed to detect people because they are basically big metal detectors, and they are in the roadway. They're not pressure activated, but they have an inductance field that detects when metal is introduced into the environment. And since your vehicle is made of metal, it will detect a vehicle. Since you're not made of metal, it won't detect you. But there is no loop. On this side of the gate, there should be an obstruction loop. On this side of the gate, right about here, should be a shadow loop. And that shadow loop, as soon as the gate starts moving, that shadow loop drops out so that it can actually close, because otherwise, as soon as the metal from the gate went over the loop, it would reverse the gate and you'd just get stuck in this cycle of never closing. And then somewhere back on the other side, we need free exit is usually pretty handy, and that's so that somebody can, as they're coming down the driveway, the gate will begin to open. And maybe just a little bit further past the shadow loop would be a second obstruction loop, so that the gate doesn't close. To be very clear, vehicle detection loops are not required, but they're a really good idea, because if the gate doesn't know your vehicle's there, it can start closing. It can cause several $1,000s worth of damage to your vehicle in a very short period of time, because the gate doesn't know your vehicle's there and begins to close, and you're trying to drive through it, and you can tear up your gate and the vehicle. So one of the good things is this right here is Ken was instrumental in getting us the gate from Digger Specialties. So Ken worked closely with Josh to get the gate design and get the gate, and they did a plant tour. So if you want to see that, that's over on Stoney Ridge Farm.
I'll put a link right here.
Yeah, probably somewhere down in here.
Yeah.
There'll be a link. So hinge selection is very important. Because we want the gate to swing freely and be as easy on the motors as possible, we use the best hinges that are available to us, and these hinges are special because this part is steel, but these gates are aluminum, so we have a half steel, half aluminum hinge. There's a ball bearing in the bottom of these, and then after we hang these, we will grease these up, and they should swing very freely. Now what we do is we just tack the top couple, then we'll put the gate in here, and to get both hinge sets aligned perfectly, we'll drop that gate in there, make sure this hinge down here lines up, and then we'll tack the bottom hinge, and at the same time we'll make sure that the gate lines up and we don't have any offset, and that we've done all our measurements correctly, so that the gate lines up perfectly. So make sure it's perfectly level and then perfectly vertically aligned. Alright, so we're at the end of day one, and I'll kind of walk through what we've got here, where we're at. So we mounted our operators up, and they're just sitting on posts. Now the posts look a little bit tall right now. That's not a big deal. We're going to come off tomorrow. We're going to level these off, so we'll basically cut them off, drop the operators down where we want them, and make sure that they're level straight across the driveway. We did set our gooseneck pole down there. We've got our solar panel set up right over here. It's all bolted together. So this is the 190 watt solar panel that's going to run the entire system. We've got this mounted. We've got the cabinet down underneath. If you're thinking, why did we set it so low? That's because the customers requested to kind of leave it low and make it hidden. So we have two Group 27 deep cycle marine batteries that are going to be going in this cabinet that'll provide us with all the power when we have cold days or a lot of cycles. So we'll have be generating plenty of power to keep the gate operational all the time. So tomorrow we'll trench in all the lines. We'll talk a little bit more about that, how that all works. Put the loops in the driveway and basically finish up the gate. This is really where the important stuff and the knowledge comes in, as to how to do that and make sure it's all tidy. On the operators, one of the most important things that we do is we put everything in Conduit. And the reason that we're putting everything in Conduit is, number one, per code. But number two is if there's ever a problem, we can pull new wire in here or add wire to it, do whatever we need. That gives us a path between two objects. Conduit for low voltage has to be a minimum of 18 inches of cover. And so you can see here, this is the power going from our solar panel all the way back to the operator back behind you. And we've run a 3/4 inch conduit. The longer your runs are, you may want to oversize your conduit just a little bit. The bigger the conduit is, the easier it's going to be to fish it in there. We use 1/2 inch conduit, and the problem with 1/2 inch conduit is it can be really hard to fish, especially when you start getting over like 2 bends. Another thing to remember is that we can't go over 4 turns, so we can't have more than 4 90s in our conduit before we have to have a pole box or something else to start over again. The other thing that we have to do is anytime we come up above ground, we have to run flex. And you can either use metallic flex or non-metallic flex, but because we're in a corrosive atmosphere here, we decided to use non-metallic conduit for all of our above ground stuff. So we've got a ground rod driven here, and we'll put another ground rod back by the operators. But this is just going to have a ground in it, and then it'll come out the conduit and then attach to the ground. There's no need for that to be in conduit necessarily. We just don't want to have a big gaping hole back here. It's just to make things a little bit tidier. So when you're laying your conduit in the trench, it's really important to keep the ends clear. As you put it in there, if you get a bunch of this mud in there, that can make it almost impossible to pull your wires. So be very, very careful about not getting dirt inside your conduit, because you'll have all kinds of problems. The glue that you use with conduit is usually sold in the same aisle. It's not at all like PVC conduit for sprinklers and stuff like that. We're not actually trying to keep the water out. In fact, water will get in these conduits and fill it up. We're just trying to keep it connected together. So you use the correct glue no primer needed. So we just ran our fish tape all the way through this conduit, and what we're going to do is we're going to run number 10 or 10 gauge wire all the way back to the operator. We've got about a 60-foot run, let's say, but we did end up pulling that connection apart. What you'll find is if you've got these 90s, it's very, very difficult to get that wire fished through there. So don't be afraid to pull your connectors apart and fish your wire in, and then just cut some extra, leave a little bit of a tail so that you can fish it back through there by hand, because getting the fish tape through that bend is very difficult. The other thing to think about when you're fishing wire is you make it really difficult if there's any friction on this wire as the other person on the other end's pulling. It'll make it almost impossible. I could stop him from pulling just by putting a little pressure like that on it, and he'll be pulling it. See, he's mad at me now. So keep that free and actually try and push it down in the conduit as best you can, and that'll make the person on the other end a lot happier. To do this, what we have is we've got this racketeer, and as you can see, it just two halves and they collapse together. We have all kinds of different holes for multiple different wires or whatever we need to do. And then we can just set it up like that with the form stake, and it works really, really good. So we take that with us on all of our projects. So I'll show you how we put this back together. We just have to make sure we have our fittings on, and anything, this thing will want to get hooked up on any little edge. We'll see if it can. Normally you don't fish solid wire like this into conduits, especially not one that's small. We're just trying to make it look tidy. We're going to consider this our slave operator, which means that's the operator where all the controls will go into, but they're going to communicate, and that one will tell this operator what to do. There's very few things that will run into this operator. So our solar panel's back behind you, and we're going to run the conduit into here. So we'll come up here, tie into our power here, then run it back down across the road along with our communication wires. Now, this is all 24-volt solar. So we can run the 24-volt solar plus our comm wires, our communication wires, between the two operators in the same conduit. However, if we were running a 110-volt system, we would not be able to put our control wires in the same conduit as the 110 power or 220 or whatever else. It all has to be low voltage, which means less than 90 volts. So anything over 90 volts has to be separated, which all of our controls are less than 90 volts, and then your 110 power would be over, so they have to be separated in conduits. Right here we've got a 1-inch knockout, we've got a 3/4 inch, and then we have 3 1/2-inch knockouts. So we don't have enough knockouts. What we're gonna end up doing is drilling a hole right here, and what I like to use is I like to use this Greenlee quick hole set carbide cutters, and so we'll just pop another hole right in here that'll give us our conduit, 3/4 inch conduit that's gonna be able to go across the road. Those plates are thick. All right, so what we're doing now is kind of the final step after we get all of the conduits run. We're just running this flex. This is non-metallic liquid tight flex that we're running from here up to the operator. You've got to have something here that can take up the slack in case there's any settling of the trenches or something. That's code. So we can't hardwire rigid PVC conduit right into here, which would be nice, but there's no expansion and contraction. So we have this flex, and we could run it tight down like that, but we don't want to do that because then again we lose any adjustability, and then it's pulling down on that conduit if there's any settling later on. So we give it a little bit of room, and we try and make this look as nice and uniform as possible while it's still being a controlled mess, basically. So as soon as we get that done, we'll bring all these wires into the box up here, and then we'll be terminating all those wires where they belong, and we'll show you what that looks like. And I've labeled all these, so I've got an eye right here. That is this eye right behind us. We've got a shadow loop coming in right here. We've got our free exit loop that's on down the driveway. We've got our power wires going to our secondary operator along with the control wire, and that can all be in the same conduit because it's not over 90 volts. This is all considered low voltage. If we had 110, we could not put the low voltage stuff in with the 110 power. So because this is all low voltage, we're good. This is an obstruction loop, and this is a keypad, wired keypad back behind us. And so all that stuff comes in here. We've got a couple wires over here on the secondary operator. The only two wires that are going over there are going to be our power wires. feeding from the panel, basically looping through the operator and then going over to the panel. Basically the other eye is over there. All it does is draw power, and then this eye sees it and makes that connection. So the only thing it needs is power, and we can wire that directly into that secondary operator. The important thing on these eyes is that they have to be between a certain dimension. And I think that's, if memory serves, that's 19 inches, and the maximum it can be is 27 inches to the actual eye itself. We always go 24, we know we're in that realm. And because in Wyoming we have a lot of snow, that gets us up off the ground so that you don't have grass and weeds and stuff growing up and blocking that eye. So we don't like to put them at the low end of the side, we prefer to err on the high side. One of the things Josh asked us is if we could put the eye down here below the gate just to make it simple. And the reason that we can't do that is simply because then it makes it too easy to step over it and potentially miss something. So they want it basically where it's really hard to get up over it, kind of like your garage doors. It's the exact same principle. We just wrapped up the install on this all-o-matic SW325 operator. We've got two of them, one on either side of the gate. And we have the loop detectors here. This is where all the loop detectors plug in, and these are EDI detectors. And then we've got everything wired into the board correctly here. As you can see, we've tidied up all the conduit and had to look for a place for the receiver. We're going to actually get an antenna extension kit and hopefully mount it on the post over here behind us. We do have a siren operated sensor on this, so we'll show you how that works. It does have 3 different settings where you can set it to open for 15 minutes, 1 hour, or indefinitely. Thanks to McKay in Idaho, who sells those, manufactures and sells that product. Great product, and that's something that oftentimes gets overlooked on a gate, is how is the fire department or emergency personnel going to access your property if there is an event. And I can guarantee you they will gain access, but this is a lot easier and a lot cheaper for you to fix if they do need to gain access, or saves a ton of critical time when something happens and you need to get them up to your place fast. So always remember to put a Knox box or some sort of a siren operated sensor on your gate. The siren operated sensor is really nice. Will only activate, we've got it set to only activate on yelp mode. You can set it to activate on loud noises such as horns and things like that, but that's not recommended because it's too easy for other people to fool your gate operator. This geometry, we went back and forth on whether or not we should lock this arm out or if we should leave a little bit of play so if that gate gets bumped or something that it won't cause undue stress on the motor. This motor and the gear itself here is extremely strong, and where they usually see the shearing is on the splines down below. Now if we need to operate this gate because there's an event, it's just that easy. So you can put a paddle lock on here, pop this off once you pull the padlock off, and then manually operate the gate, and that's just how freely they move. The nice thing about this is because it is DC powered, powered off solar, if the power goes out all the way around us, this gate should still work. But in the event that there was a power loss at the operator for some reason, we do have a way to swing the gates open. You can see that we've got our sign, which is required by UL 325 to be mounted to the gate and must remain there. As ugly as that is, it is a requirement of UL 325, and so we've got that there. Probably the owner has talked about maybe painting the cabinet and the arms so that they match the gate later on. The arms come galvanized, and chances are that if you paint it, it'll flake off and you'll have to paint it probably a couple different times, so just think about that as you do that. Other than that, everything turned out really well. The hinges worked great, the posts worked great, everything lined up really well, and we're pretty happy with the install. And I can say from our experience, these all-o-matic operators were a pleasure to work with, and Brian Boutte at all-o-matic was very helpful when we had a couple things that were specific to their operators. Called him up and he was able to help us work through that really easily. So can't recommend them and SOS siren operated sensors enough. So thank you, Brian and McKay Lundgren, for helping us with those items. And thanks to the Stoney Ridge Farmer for having us out. Forever Fence and Rail was kind enough to help us get the gate built, and that was provided by the fine folks at Digger Specialties. And then we have Goofball Ryan Sloop, who contributed. What did you contribute, Ryan? Ryan contributed to the distraction department 100%. It's quality. So that wraps this operator up. We'll run it a couple times, cycle it. Oh, let's talk about remotes. This does have the LiftMaster remote system on it, and we will be working with Stoney Ridge Farmer to get a cell phone app so that he can actually operate this with his cell phone. We're going to integrate that into it, and then right now we have a wireless keypad, but we're going to change that out to a wired keypad. So we ran all the conduit and put that in place. The wireless keypad is all that we had at the time, so we'll be getting that changed out at a later date, or he'll work with us to get that changed out. So should be a fully functional gate and last him for a long time. And I can tell you these things are bulletproof. I was very impressed with how stout these operators are. These are extremely light gates, but a gate up to 1,000 pounds, I think they're rated to maybe 2,000 pounds, is not going to be a problem for these operators even in wind. So really impressed with the power and functionality of these operators. And until next time, you have a good dang day.